Hello, Rama Pupodu. Hope all are in good health, feeling great, wonderful, having a happy and peaceful life. Now, let's go with Major Chadwick, the next devotee. Frank Humphreys was the first Westerner to come to Ramana Maharishi. He went up the hill in 1911 and seeing Bhagavan on a rock outside Virupaksha cave wrote, "From that human body, God radiated terrifically." The second Westerner who came to Bhagavan was Paul Brunton in 1930. He treated Ramana Maharishi as his guru. As a disciple, he elicited Bhagavan's direct teaching of self-enquiry, wrote several books on it, and spread it all over the spiritual world. Reading Paul Brunton, a third Westerner came to Bhagavan. There is an eternal triangle: God, Guru, and man. Frank Humphreys saw Bhagavan as God. Paul Brunton saw Bhagavan as Guru, and the eternal triangle still had to be completed. So the third Westerner had to come. This third Westerner too came from England, and he saw the most natural, the fullest human being in Bhagavan. This Westerner's name was Alan W. Chadwick. The old devotees of Bhagavan endearingly called him Satvik. The Sanskrit word Satvik means pure, or one who is free from worldly passions and attachments. Paradoxically, this Sattvic man had been a major in the British Army and had participated in killing its enemies in the First World War. In Ramana Ashramam, A.W. Chadwick was known as Major Chadwick. He came in 1935 to Arunachala after reading Brunton's book. 11 years before he came to Bhagavan, he had already formulated his own form of meditation, which he was scrupulously following every day. Chadwick said, "I had argued with myself that since God had created this world, it was only out of himself that he could have done so. For if there was some other apart from him, then he could not be God, the undisputed and omnipotent power. So I decided that the seeker himself was God. My method of meditation thus was to make the mind cease from thinking as an individual and just rest in its pristine Godhead. Do not think, just be." How prophetic! Even before coming to Bhagavan, his form of meditation was to stop thinking and just be. Major Chadwick read Paul Brunton's book, A Search in Secret India. In it, 3 chapters were dedicated to Sri Ramana Maharishi, and it also had his photograph. These 3 chapters, and especially the picture of the Maharishi, totally captivated him. He felt, "Arunachala is my home, and this Maharishi is my spiritual master." At that time, he was in Majorca of Spain. He immediately disposed of whatever pending matters there were, gave up his house and possessions in Majorca, went home to England to spend some time with his sisters, whom he was very fond of. Then he gave up his home there and started his journey to India. He never returned to England. He was the first Westerner to stay permanently in Arunachala at the feet of his chosen master. The thing that we seekers have to notice is something I felt very deeply during my association with Chadwick. There was no gap between his determination and his action. After reading these 3 chapters, there was no wavering or indecision. He knew that Arunachala was his home and Ramana Maharishi his spiritual master, and the next step he took was to renounce. He went home to England to fulfill his sister's wishes, and then took off to Arunachala, never to return. After a long journey, he arrived in Arunachala, standing in front of Bhagavan, who he was seeing for the first time, his master in flesh and blood. He felt he was seeing simultaneously God, Guru, and the perfect human being. When asked how he felt, Chadwick said, "I felt the tremendous peace of his presence and of his graciousness. It was not as though I was meeting him for the first time. It seemed I had always known him. It was not even like the renewal of an old acquaintanceship. It had always been there, though I had not been conscious of it till that time. Now I know. Look at Chadwick. He gave up his all. He cut off all relationship with his friends, relatives, and fellow officers to be an unknown sadhu in an unknown land. This is the kind of determination, renunciation, and decisive action that we seekers have to imbibe. We are right in front of the truth. Arunachala and Bhagavan Ramana. Arunachala is not a hill, and Bhagavan Ramana is not a person. They are the one truth, the I am, which Hindu scriptures speak of and which God declares to Moses. The powerful presence of Bhagavan made Chadwick decide then and there to stay permanently with his master. There was no wavering in any form. He never altered his decision, never questioned it. When such a remarkable disciple surrenders totally, how does the master respond? The master takes complete charge. The rest of his devotees thought it strange because Bhagavan took very special interest in Chadwick. He told the management, he has given up his all and come. We have to look after him. Food should be prepared for him without spices. In Ramana Ashramam, they make a special vegetable and soup for foreigners called Dorai Kutu and Dorai Rasam. It was formulated by Bhagavan for Chadwick in 1935. In those days, the Westerner, the white man, was addressed as Dorai, meaning master. Naturally, Chadwick was also addressed like that. The vegetable dish and the soup were named Dorai Kutu and Dorai Rasam after Chadwick. Even today, these dishes carry the same names. We cannot forget Chadwick at all. Breakfast in the ashram invariably was and still is idli, a steamed rice and lentil cake served with chili powder and oil. Chadwick's appellation for that chili powder was gunpowder because for him it was explosively hot. So Bhagavan ordered ghee and sugar to be served to Chadwick along with his idli. This practice continues to this day for foreigners. And in the night, because he could not eat the spicy rasam and chutney, Bhagavan arranged for some milk and fruits to be given to him. So in every matter, Bhagavan paid special attention to Chadwick. Everyone, including the Sarva Adhikari Chinnaswamy, noticed this. Consequently, Chadwick was permitted to construct a personal room within the ashram, something without precedent in the ashram's history. Many years later, Yogi Ramaya, Balarama Reddiyar, and then Devaraja Mudaliyar were permitted to build 3 such rooms adjacent to Chadwick's. While his room was being built, Chadwick stayed in a tile-roofed adjacent to ashram's storeroom. Sometimes, during his morning walks, Bhagavan would enter this shed like a friend and approach Chadwick's table. Chadwick would be seated on a chair in a corner, reading a book. Bhagavan would pick up his wallet and take out photos, identity cards, everything, and question him, "What is this?" And this. Bhagavan moved that closely with Chadwick. Even after Chadwick moved to his newly built cottage, Bhagavan used to occasionally visit him. After lunch every day, Bhagavan would take a walk around the pond in Palakuttu. Chadwick's room was very close and was separated from it by a fence with a wicket gate. Sometimes Bhagavan would open it and come to Chadwick's room. While paying special attention to Chadwick's physical needs, Bhagavan was also guiding him spiritually. On the very first day of Chadwick's arrival, Bhagavan talked to him so freely that Chadwick, who was very tired after a long journey, felt at home and at ease. After his rest in the afternoon, when he came, Bhagavan sent word for a copy of Who Am I and gave it to Chadwick. And he didn't just hand it over, he said, "Read it and practice it." Through his spiritual gift, Bhagavan commenced showering his exclusive spiritual blessings on Chadwick. Within a few days, He called Chadwick again and gave him B.V. Narasimha Swami's Self-Realization, the first biography of Ramana Maharishi in English. Again he said, read it and practice it. Chadwick told me that he formulated his spiritual practices based on reading these two books. Chadwick's whole attention was pivoted on Bhagavan and Bhagavan's teachings. Chadwick understood the seriousness of his responsibility as a true disciple. Thus, his attention, his grasping the teaching, his experiencing the glory of the proximity of the Guru, these became his paramount duties. He was very meticulous. Either he would meditate in his room or on Arunachala, or if he wanted some relaxation, he would read spiritual books. The rest of the time he was seated in front of his master, Bhagavan Ramana. When I asked him why he was all the time seated in front of Bhagavan, he said, I felt that here is God and Guru in human form. When I am able to be near him in his presence and his proximity, will I miss this golden opportunity? Am I a fool to have come here to while away my time? Chadwick was one person who not only stayed permanently in Ramana Ashramam but didn't waste a minute. There were no attractions or distractions for him. Even when other Westerners came, they used to go to Pondicherry, Bangalore, Ooty, or some cool place during summer. But Chadwick rarely left Bhagavan's presence because, as he told me, here is my master. I used to be moved when he spoke like this about Bhagavan. Chadwick was a towering personality. Tall and handsome, he was a very disciplined man. He had a welcoming smile and was friendly towards everyone. While meticulously attending to his sadhana, he was also very supportive of the ashram management. He even became part of it after Bhagavan dropped the body. When the ashram had to face litigations, financial problems, and internal squabbles, he stayed on in the ashram, supported the management, and stood by them. Unlike Paul Brunton and Frank Humphreys, Chadwick listened extensively to the dialogues the master had with devotees and visitors. Books like Talks with Ramana Maharishi and Day by Day with Bhagavan were verified by Chadwick and Bhagavan. In Talks with Ramana Maharishi, he has given a beautiful introduction where he says, not only were they shown to Bhagavan, but the questions there were all verified from the questioner himself, whether it had been properly noted down. And Bhagavan verified them after it was written on the notebook. So, while Brunton was the sail that spread Bhagavan's teachings in the world, Chadwick was the anchor giving us confidence that every word recorded was authenticated by the Master himself. At this juncture, I would like to share a few incidents that took place at Sri Ramana Ashramam in which I too was involved. In a way, these were all connected with Chadwick. After my graduating from college in 1956, my father asked me to study further. I refused, saying I would rather work and earn some money as my family was then going through some financial difficulties. From 1956 to 1958, I was staying in Tiruvannamalai and trying my level best to get a job. Major Chadwick and Mrs. Talyarkan also tried to get me a job, but the higher power had a different scheme for me. During those 2 years, I moved closely with all the old devotees who lived in Tiruvannamalai. Chadwick, Arthur Osborne, Muruganar, Cohen, Devaraja Mudaliar, and a host of others like Professor G.V. Subramania, who used to regularly visit the ashram. Something about them aroused in me tremendous awe, wonder, and interest. I used to pester them. What did you talk to Bhagavan? What was Bhagavan's relationship with you? Sometimes they condescended and took some time off to tell me. I used to get so excited that I would invariably react by requesting them to write all these precious gems down so that they don't get lost. Many of them demurred, saying, who am I and what can I say? I used to plead with them. Who is going to be worried about you? It is about what Bhagavan told you and what his relationship was with you. You owe a responsibility to posterity by preserving these remarkable reminiscences. Please note them down. I am very grateful to Chadwick because he was the only person who encouraged me on many a day when there were no crowds or much work to be done at the ashram. He would make me sit next to him and narrate a thrilling incident. I did not know then that after narrating each incident, he was going to his room and noting it down in a notebook. In 1958, I went away from Tiruvannamalai to take a 2-year postgraduate course in philosophy. Before I left, Chadwick told me, "Thank you. I have noted all of these reminiscences in a notebook, and after my post graduation, I worked for a few months and came back in 1960 to live in Ramana Ashramam. The very first thing that I did was to go straight to Chadwick's room and tell him, 'Give me your prasad, that notebook in which you have written everything.' This notebook of Chadwick's was the first book of reminiscences that was published. A few days after the book was released, I received a letter of thanks from Chadwick, in which he wrote, 'There is no tradition in our ashram to dedicate the book to a person of one's choice, for every book is an offering to Bhagavan. Ramana Arpana Mastu, dedicated to the holy feet of Sri Bhagavan. If there would have been such a custom, I would certainly have dedicated this book to you, dear Ganesan.' By that time, I had become so close to the old devotees that another person, G.V. Subramania, listened to me and said, 'I am writing my reminiscences in my mother tongue, Telugu.' I replied, 'What is the use if you write it only in Telugu? You are an English professor. Translate it into English too.' This was the second book of reminiscences. He had it published outside. I pleaded with him and subsequently got its future editions published by Ramana Ashramam. A cascade of reminiscences followed. T.K. Sundaresa Iyer's At the Feet of Bhagavan, Devaraja Mudaliar's My Recollections of Bhagavan Sri Ramana, Suri Nagama's My Life at Sri Ramana Ashramam, and then those of Kunju Swami, Balarama, Reddyar, and Kanangammal. The spiritual food was theirs. I was the lucky one, blessed to be the spoon that served it to hungry spiritual seekers. That's all, folks. Let's continue the next chapter. Thank you. Bye bye. Rama Rama Pupoda.